Mark, thank you very much for availing yourself this morning. Before we get into all this argy-bargy about politics, what is the everyday person on the ground faced with in Britain? We understand that quality of life is not nearly where it should be. So as all of this is going on, what are they faced with?
Well, we're faced with an unprecedented cost of living crisis. Um, Energy prices going through the roof, mortgage uh, payments uh, going up by up to £500 a month more. People unprecedented going to food banks, homelessness, poverty, and yet we have a conservative government attempting to give tax cuts to the super rich rather than helping the poor and vulnerable in society. And on top of that, that conservative government is in a state of meltdown. You've got a conservative prime minister that has lasted just over a month in office before resigning after putting forward a disastrous mini budget and having a African descended Chancellor Kwesi Kwarteng in position, who she was in lockstep with. All he was doing was implementing, Liz Truss's policies, and yet he was sacked for doing as he was told. He was the fall guy. And then after that, the third most senior cabinet member, Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, was sacked. I mean, there's been nothing like it in the whole of contemporary British history before.
You mentioned Kwesi Kwarteng. We'll get into him in a few moments. These tax cuts for the rich, that decision since being abandoned. But when you speak to people on the ground, what is it that they want to see, right? Especially with the possible resurrection of Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister.
Well, people on the ground want to see a general election. They want this lot out of office. They clearly can't run the country. They've had 12 years. They've made a mess of it. And now this is a suggestion that the most corrupt, lying leader that we've ever had, Boris Johnson, who, by the way, is still facing a House of Commons Privilege Committee inquiry into him deceiving Parliament. If he were to take office, which is unlikely because, frankly, he's got, I think, 40 nominations, and the bar is at 100 nominations for him to be a candidate. Rishi Sunak, the former Chancellor, the Finance Minister, has soared ahead and gone beyond, we're told, the 100 nomination threshold. If he were to get into office, there's every possibility that he would be out of office again by January if there's a bad finding from the Privilege Committee inquiry into his lies.
You speak of privilege. We understand that Liz Truss is entitled to 129,000 US dollars a year as a next prime minister, in spite of the very short time that she spent in office. How has that news been received by people whom you described as facing a cost of living crisis and the quality of life not being as ideal as it should be?
Well, it just looks another example of the rich and privileged, like Liz Truss, the elite, putting their noses in the pig trough and helping themselves to more wealth. And it doesn't sit well at all for families who are facing, particularly black people. We're at the hardest end of this crisis because we're the poorest in this country. It doesn't sit well with us that you've got these people just wallowing in riches. And just to make a point about the attempt by the Conservatives to give their mates, the super rich, tax cuts, this was something that even their friends in the city couldn't stomach because they felt that that was exposing the greed of the capitalist system. And it was just too much and too far. And the markets rejected that proposed cut in taxes for the super rich. And now the Conservatives said that they would not increase corporation tax That's a tax that businesses pay. That's currently at 19%, but now they're going to be forced to raise it to 25% next year, which is what Rishi Sunak was saying should happen. So I think he's going to be the big winner in this contest. Last time he was the favourite of the Conservative members of Parliament, but was rejected by the Conservative membership, I think, because of the colour of his skin. I think this time the colour of his skin will matter less than him being the best candidate in terms of running the economy. And by the way, I'm not a Conservative. I support the opposition Labour Party. But of the shower of thieves and charlatans that are the Conservative Party, I think Rishi Sunak is the best option for getting us out of this mess. But I believe, frankly, there should be a general election. Let the people decide.
Sure. Very quickly for us, I mean, a lot of countries are watching this with keen interest, right? And some countries on the continent, is this the model, for lack of a better expression, right? So is this the democracy that anyone should look up to?
Not at all. What we need is proportional representation. We've got to get rid of this government that on just 43% of the vote at the last general election in 2019 got 56% in terms of members of parliament. So they have an 80-seat majority. That is a farce. That means that people who voted for alternative parties, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, the Greens, haven't really got fair representation in parliament. And that's what I think we need to have to improve the democracy in Britain. And we also have an unelected head of state, King Charles, who's sitting on top of South Africa's Cullinan diamond, which was stolen from South Africa, the Kohinoor diamond from India in his jewelry collection. These need to be handed back, and we need to reform and drastically change so-called British democracy.
Marc Wordsworth is the Liberation Movement UK founder. Thank you very much for your time.